here today to talk to you around high erucic acid, or HEAR, oilseed rape management, and how to get the best out of this important crop. High erucic acid oilseed rape can be treated like any other crop of oilseed rape. In terms of crop nutrition, in terms of crop inputs from sprays and seed, it is exactly the same as any other crop. There's nothing special around it in terms of management requirements. It is a very easy crop to grow. It's definitely got some yield improvements and some agronomic management improvements, which I'll go through later, and it has really proved itself in the field. So high erucic acid has got a perception that its yield slightly lower than the list varieties and the absolute best genetics on the list. That is true to an extent. They will do 100% of the controls on the list. We trial that internally ourselves, and we find that that's the case when we compare them to our set of controls, such as DK expansion. In terms of agronomics, they have improved quite substantially. So if you look on the screen now, you'll see Ramses, Rhodes and Resort, and you can see that the stem canker and light leaf spot scores have improved. And you can definitely get 6s and 7s for both in the Rhodes variety. This gives us confidence that they've got a good varietal resistance against the key diseases in oilseed rape in the UK. In terms of other factors, we know that they've got some pod shatter resistance in Ramses and Rhodes, so you can see that that will help. We're not using yield at harvest to freak rain events and so on. Now hold on to the seeds and we keep that pod shatter up. And we have got the ability to get pod shatter resistance into the crop, and that's another benefit in terms of yield. The other aspect is PGR. So we know that these varieties, particularly Ramses and Rhodes, do get very tall. They're very vigorous growing, strong growing varieties, and they will get a sizable height. This just needs managing. It's probably slightly over and above some varieties on the list, but there will be other varieties that will be as big. So it's an extra consideration in certain scenarios that you might need to think a bit more about PGR. So I'm standing here in a crop of Ramses, which is a sort of main variety, if you like. The first point I want to make is that treat this as any other oilseed rape crop. There is nothing special about this oilseed rape crop in terms of its management. It is any other oilseed rape, any double O variety that you would be growing. Anything you do, you can treat these exactly the same. So all the herbicides, fungicides, PGRs, all those elements are all the same. There is a few points to highlight around HEAR rape. So HEAR rape has improved in genetics. So if you used to grow HEAR rape and you're coming back to it, or you're new to growing HEAR rape and have heard things around it in the past, the older varieties, things like Eraton that we used to sell, did have some yield drag, and they had some disease implication problem. As we've moved forward, these things have improved. So we now have better scores with an average of 6 or 7 for things like Foma and light leaf spot. So Foma is stem canker, and that's improved our genetic base in terms of our agronomic package, in terms of disease management. So they will still need spraying, they will still need management from a fungicide point of view. However, we are now within the recommended lists range of light leaf spot and stem canker scores of 6s and 7s. They have improved genetics in terms of height, so that the Ramses and the Rhodes will get tall, and that's a good thing, and I'll come back to that in a second. But they all need management. Those two varieties do need some management in terms of some PGR. This might be slightly over and above the list, but it's just because they're big varieties, they do get sizable. Resort is slightly shorter height, and its stem strength is better. So if you did want something that is definitely not going to fall over, that is possibly the one to go looking for if you've got a very fertile soil. In terms of yield improvement, these varieties, we trial these varieties in new candidates lists. So we do our own internal testing looking at various varieties of oilseed rape. We compare HEAR rape against other varieties and other specialist varieties like whole. We also compare them against controls such as DK expansion in our trials. And what we find is that the HEAR rape varieties now that we're growing are producing 100% of controls in those trials. So we are getting the yield, and they're all capable of doing 4.5 tonne plus. And on farm we do have 5.5 to 6 tonne a hectare recorded quite often. So they will yield it well in the right scenarios, and they can be treated the same as other varieties of oilseed rape in that from that aspect. So we see one of the key benefits from our HEAR rape varieties is their vigour performance. So if we look first at autumn, We can see in this trial that they perform better than other hybrids, and you can see that they really get going and they want to get going, and that's carried across onto farm. So we do see that these are very vigorous in their early establishment phase in the autumn, dealing with those pests such as slugs and cabbage stem flea beetle at establishment. If we move on to spring vigour, that vigour performance carries on, so we see better spring vigour, and what we tend to find, certainly on farm, is that these varieties are always the first to get going on farm. They really have got that vigour performance in spring, and we can see that in trials, and we have anecdotal evidence of that on farm, that they really do burst out of the ground. And this gives you great confidence in them in terms of pigeon management, but also in terms of flea beetle management, because we know that having high autumn and spring vigour scores is very important for controlling flea